Welcome to Locke Key Unlocked, a podcast about Locke and Key on Netflix, as well as the comic books by Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez. I'm Alex.
I'm Justin.
I'm Pete.
And we have a special guest for you on this episode, one of the showrunners of Locke and Key on Netflix, Meredith Averill. Meredith, welcome.
Welcome.
So excited to have you.
I am so excited to be here as a fan of your podcast.
Oh, get out of here.
Yes, I have listened to almost all of the episodes. And I mean, first of all, I'm just tickled that there is a podcast that does a deep dive on our episodes. Yeah. But in general, but also the fact that you are all fans of the comic and have just like completely embraced that our show is something different, but also that you appreciate, what we tried to do, which is keep the heart of the comic there that Joe and Gabriel created. So I've just really enjoyed listening to the episodes, even when you're making fun of things that don't make sense.
I mean, we love the show and these characters so much that anytime we're making fun, it's only lovingly.
I know, and that completely comes across. And there are times when I'm like, maybe they do have a point here.
Well, I would like to say that's so great to hear because not only because it's this thing of like the comic book is so amazing, and as somebody who loves something, you get a little worried about like what's going to happen when it transitions to a TV show or whatever, and it's done with, like you said, in such a great way that takes the heart of what it is and makes its own choices. Because we want to see something new, exciting with the things we love, and it does such a great job of it, and it's been so enjoyable to watch, especially season 2. Then as fans of the comic book and as people who know, Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez, those two creeps, it's great to see what you've kind of done with what they started.
Thank you. That truly is the highest praise, and that's exactly what Carlton and I, set out to try to do. And so that you kind of get that intention is huge and awesome. But I do feel that I have to set the record straight on something.
Good.
Okay, here we go.
I've had sleepless nights. I'm really glad we get a chance to talk about this. Kinsey does not have her own bathroom.
I mean, who's sharing that bath? It's beautiful.
The Jack and Jill bathroom. There's 2 doors. One goes into Tyler's bedroom and one goes into Kinsey. Wow. I mean, I can't tell you the time.
Jack and Jill.
Not her own.
So funny. And let me say, we did dedicate more time than I expected to talking about the bathroom floor plan of
It's also the garbage plate discussion I appreciated. One of our writers is from Rochester. But Scott is not going to Rochester, New York. He's going sadly, no garbage plates in his future.
Well, they have, I believe, Pete, you're probably the expert. They have like a fancier, more English, more British garbage
plate.
You can't take a garbage plate and make it fancier. It's not, then it's something it's not supposed to be.
All right. Well, I did want to ask you about something that happened recently before we jump in and talk season 2. This actually happened yesterday. Britney Spears posted about your show. Big fan of Locke and Key. What was that moment like when you found out?
It was amazing. My assistant, my Toronto assistant, sent me the link on Instagram like 7 minutes after Britney posted it or something, and was like, "Did you know about this?" And it's a very long, meandering kind of post of Britney's, as she's does sometimes, and then at the very end for her to be like, holy crap, have you guys seen Locke and Key? It's pretty great. I'm like, can we put that on the poster for Britney Spears says it's pretty great. That was amazing. And so
the full hashtag I believe was free Britney so she can watch Locke and Key. Shortened it for the movement.
I was pretty special and random, and she has an outreach to so many people, so it'd be great if that kind of opens up the show to some of her fans, but I'm thrilled that she watches it.
That's amazing. I kind of want to know what her favorite key is at this point.
Oh my God. I just have so many questions. I just want to be a fly on the wall watching her watch it.
That would be
now to jump into segue from this.
Would it be the music box key? All right, sorry. I don't know.
I have a very obscure
head key. I feel like she'd like the trippy head sequences, right?
Yeah.
Maybe?
I mean, everybody loves that.
My very obscure Britney Spears joke is she would like the Locke Key. Nobody gets that? There's a song she had called Lucky.
Lucky. Oh, I see what you did there. Okay.
I see you, Alex. I appreciate it.
We should cross over with your Britney podcast, Alex. That's just you alone.
That's kind of my thing.
Okay.
Let's actually jump in and talk about season 2 because obviously the season is great, but I'm curious about the process of structuring it, given that you already had season 3 in the offing. That's already been filmed at this point. Did you write them both back to back, or how did you approach the structure in general to both of those seasons, I guess?
Well, we started the writer's room for season 2 about actually like 2 years ago this time. And we had our season 2 writer's room from like October through April of 2020. Mm-hmm. And so during the entirety of that room, we didn't know the fate of whether or not there would be a season 3.
Oh, okay.
So we wrote season 2 and broke season 2, not knowing, if we were going to get a season 3. And then right at the tail end of our writer's room, Netflix picked us up for season 3.
That's got to be so satisfying.
I mean, especially as everyone was holing up in home for the pandemic, it was nice to know, like, okay, well, now I have something to do. And we had to do all of our writer's room for season 3 over Zoom. And we did that all last summer. So I think we started in June of 2020 and we finished right around this time last year. So, I mean, there were pros and cons of having it done that way. I mean, the con is that there's always something nice about being able to watch the episodes and learn from them and say, okay, we know now maybe next season we want to do a little more of this. Like, for example, after we watched all of season 1, we felt like Aaron Ashmore was so terrific and we just wanted to write more for him. And, we always knew we wanted to tell more of a Duncan story, but it was so hard in season 1 because the real estate. But, being able to see those episodes, it was like, there was a craving to like want to tell more Duncan stories. So you don't have the benefit of like, we didn't get to watch all of season 2, all of those, cut together episodes and say, okay, now we know what season 3 is going to be because season 3 was already written by that time. But the pro of it, and it ended up being like a huge pro, was that as we were breaking season 3 and, certain stories, we were like, oh, it'd be great to drop this nugget in season 2 that's going to pay off in season 3. We were able to do that, which you wouldn't normally be able to do because season 2 would have already been shot. So it was nice in that way that we feel they're almost like of a piece, the 2 seasons, because we broke them and wrote them of a piece. So that was sort of, it's a very like unique thing that like Carlton is always like, it's almost like we're making a network show of 22 episodes in a row. Because we had like no break there. But I think it did work to our advantage.
Well, and especially with from a villain standpoint, I feel like going into season 3, where we are at the end of season 2, is super exciting. And we already what a great turn, I think, and surprise. And it feels like season 2 is like, hey, you just took on junior varsity. Well, buckle up because now it's varsity time.
Yeah.
This guy's terrifying.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, we got in season 2, like there was some really amazing emotional things, like that Rufus stuff had me bawling, like unbelievable touching moments. But then it's like, I'm very scared for season 3. I'm really worried about how this is all going to go down.
Oh, good. Yeah. I mean, it was important to us, I think, because Carlton's experience working on The Strain, which I didn't get to watch all of, but my understanding is that there was like one singular villain the entire series. And his lesson from that was that it's hard when you just have one villain throughout the same series. Like you want to kind of mix it up. Like, Buffy obviously did that really well. And so we wanted to introduce a new villain that wouldn't be like so separate from our mythology. Like the demon that inhabits Gideon still comes from the same place as Dodge. So there's a connection there. It all kind of ties together. But it was important to us to kind of just mix up the energy of the show. Like we even have that from season 1 and season 2. Like Lysla's Dodge is so different than Griffin's Dodge.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. I mean, people are obviously going to have preferences, but at the same time, I do think like mixing up the energy of the show is so important so that the villain doesn't keep feeling kind of stale.
Well, I really appreciate, and we talked about this quite a bit, coming from the comic books, expecting, okay, it's going to be Dodge long term. You go 50 seasons, it's still Dodge. To get to that natural ending point that you reached at the end of season 2, where it was like, okay, we've done what we need to do at this stage with Dodge and moving on to a bigger, better threat. You could feel that as a viewer, and even though I was very thrown by the end, I liked it at the same time.
Almost like you were dropped on your head all the way to the bottom,
into a dark, cold, wet place.
Yeah. I did want to just take a quick step back and ask you about going from season 2 to 3. I don't know if you can talk about this at all. My suspicion has been it's partially because Jackson Robert Scott is rapidly getting taller that you needed to do them back to back. But did that play into the decision at all, or was it just Netflix was into the show and they wanted to go from season 2 to season 3?
I don't think it had anything to do specifically with Jackson. I mean, that was really helpful because, and you'll see when you see season 3, like, I can't believe how much he's grown. It's crazy, but I think it was more just, and it was great for us because Toronto became very, very busy with productions. So the fact that our crew got to continuously work, otherwise we would have completely lost our crew because they would have gone on to other shows. For Netflix, it's all, they're looking at the money of it, and it was much cheaper to be able to just keep our stages, keep our crew working, rather than, I think, release them and, and see what happens. So I think for them, it financially, I think it made a lot of sense. I'm sure there was discussion about the Jackson of it, but that definitely didn't drive it. So I think for them, it just made a lot more sense to just kind of keep grinding through it if they knew for sure that they already wanted the show for another 2 seasons. So I don't think it was specifically Jackson, but it did help us.
They have a wall in Netflix where with his height chart, and they're like, we got to move on.
We got to go. We got to go.
Come on.
We got to learn the lessons from Stranger Things, guys. Come on.
Nobody wants these stretched out kids. We got to get them when they're tiny.
Let's talk about some of the specific arcs. I loved Tyler's arc over the course of the season. It was so emotional and so wonderful. And talking about what you were mentioning earlier in terms of learning things from the first seasons, it really seems like you leaned into Connor Jessup's talents in terms of an actor, in terms of a dramatic actor. And he was really wonderful here. What overall was your take from it? What was the goal in terms of Tyler's arc?
Yeah, I mean, 100% Connor Jessup is tremendous. And we really wanted to write to his range and his abilities. And that was actually the very first story that Carlton and I started talking about when we were just completely just blue skying season 2. What would we want to see? Was knowing that we wanted to tell the story of him approaching 18 and what that might do to him. And then how, pulling Jackie and her story into that, and wanting Tyler to get to a place, because so much of the show is, and the comic too, I think, is about trying to learn from the past and trying to make different decisions, and sometimes making different decisions, it even though you're trying to do the right thing, it just ends up screwing you in the end. And it's us trying to right the wrongs of from generations past, which I think is a really universal theme. And so Tyler and his relationship with his father, I always found from the comics and even in season 1, is is a really complicated relationship. And when Connor and Bill played those scenes in season 1, I thought they were really effective. So we really wanted to dig in a little bit deeper to that relationship and have him get to a place where he was going to decide he was going to make a different decision than his dad. And that's really, that moment with the hat. And I'm so glad you called out that moment, because it's just a small thing in the finale when he decides not to take the hat with him. That's, those moments really are important to us. So that was really the first story that we started building season 2 on, and then kind of dovetailed a lot of other stories around it, like the Aaron story and the Duncan story. And I agree with you. I think it came out so well, and that's like largely due to how tremendous Connor is, and Genevieve, frankly, too. That scene in the woods, it just like kills me.
Oh,
so sad.
I know.
It's so upsetting to even think about now. And even down to like there's a shot of just his hand like shaking, and you don't like really call attention to it. All those little details, like that's what really gets me. And it feels almost comic book. I felt like a panel from a comic book in a way.
Yeah.
Was that something
which
you guys
is hard
like,
to
let's
do
try to
in
do
a comic
that.
show, the shaking.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I know, and we talked to, when we first started talking to Joe about what the stories were going to be for season 2, he was like, oh man, that's so smart to do a story about someone rapidly approaching that age and what it might do to them. Cause it's been nice, this conversation that we were always having with Joe and Gabriel about, things that excite them about stories that we're telling, that they, think about wanting to now infuse in future comics that they're doing.
Well, I mean, sort of in that, this is a little bit off talking about the story, the characters from this season, but like you've eaten up a lot of the comic book. Which is very exciting for me as a viewer, but does that mean you're fully out of sort of that world, or are you still going to be going back and digging into some of the newer comic book stories or elements of the original series?
Oh no, there's still fun to come. There's still fun to come from those comics. We still got some stories, the flock of sparrows, isn't random. It's not random. Okay. Nothing is random in the show. Everything has a purpose.
I knew it.
No, I mean, there's definitely still things from the comic that are to come. We haven't really dipped into the sort of ancillary, like World War Key comics as much, just because it's so, they take place in different time periods. Yeah. So not as much, but from the main 6, there's still some stories to come for sure.
Nice.
All right. Well,
go ahead, Pete.
I was just going to say, like, Nina, in comparison to the comic book to the TV show, she has a little bit of an easier time, which is great. But also what's really impressive
just comparatively, not to jump on you, Pete, but like she has legitimately the worst time possible in the comic book. So it's only up from there.
She's drunk through it. She's drunk through it the whole time. So it's fine.
But also what's very cool about the show versus the comic is, there's this whole thing about growing up and what's doing right, like you mentioned, but also like having the innocence of the kind of like a child that kind of cuts through the crap a little bit, like Bodhi being able to be like, what is everybody doing? Like, let's get it together. We need a plan. Like having someone who's younger, but also just like, the voice of reason is such a great choice. And then the Bodhi Nina stuff that we got at the end of the season was so magical, and compared to like what happened with the comic was such a cool. Can you talk a little bit about like what the choices were with that? Or?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, we love that, and I see the comment a lot of times from people are like, why doesn't everyone just fucking listen to Bodhi?
Yeah. I mean, 100%. He knows what's up from the jump.
Because then the show would be over.
Plus, you're not going to listen to the younger brother.
Come on, guys. We love that he is the voice of reason, and that, and Jackson plays all of that so well. And it was great to be able to give him more dimension and more to do this season. I mean, I think like, even from the first episode where he's like overhearing the Mutuku Nina scene talking about how Ellie's going to be declared dead and he's crying, like that, like Jackson just played that so well. And all the stuff with Duncan, when Duncan like throws him out of his room, and it was great to be able to give Jackson a lot more to do. And because he is growing up. I mean, the actor's 13 now. He's a teenager.
Wow.
He has to start shaving him by the end.
He's got a little dirt on his upper lip.
Just a little dirt. You got the mustache key. You got to unlock that. The puberty key.
But yeah, I mean, his relationship with Nina becomes even more complicated in season 3, I would say. So that's definitely an arc that we just kind of started in season 2. And, his decision at the end to presumably memory key her, is a big one. And that journey he takes with her into her head, I think is so special.
Just bawling my eyes out.
Me. Oh my God. Anytime that Bill Heck is on screen, he just, and Rendell has so much presence in the show because he is the show, right? So anytime we get to show him, and I think it made sense for us not to have him for so much of season 2, and that he just appears in that head key scene with Nina, but you will see more of him in season 3.
We got very close to seeing the Tempest scene. Oh yes, it felt like in this season.
You really want that Tempest scene?
Yeah, he does.
I mean, to me, well, I will say from the comics and as a fan, it was it's their moment when they finally had it all together.
He's a classically trained actor. He's pushing for the stage.
Shakespeare is truly the original poet when you think about it, and I just think we need to touch. But it felt like that was their sort of time of power in that play, and it feels like as we move through our new Locke family's sort of moments of power, which I think the end of this season is it's so hard for them through so much of the show. They only have a couple peak moments. It'd be great to see Rendell's.
I agree. We used to joke in the writer's room that like the keepers, like they had all of these unbelievable magical keys at their disposal. Like they could be gods. They could do anything, and they're sitting around being like, "What should we use these keys for?" And they're like, let's use them to make our play really good.
I mean, I feel it. They're community theater.
It makes sense because you're like, well, Kinsey uses them to make her movie really good too.
Yeah,
so history is repeating
And
itself.
it was really.
But no, I hear you on the importance of the Tempest, and that's not something we ignore, and that is something that you'll hear more about in season 3. And it's important to just, because it helps illustrate like what we're seeing also in the present too, this parallel of like, they did use these keys for super fun things that were very innocent, like putting on a really awesome play and putting on a really awesome splattering. But then you see how they kind of distort people and how it really distorted Rendell. And so it is an important part of the show. So there may be more Tempest in season 3.
Let's talk about Kinsey while we're going through the characters. I love her arc over the course of the season because you start her, I think the first time we see her is when she's in that swan boat, literally living inside of her head. And by the end, she's not just the most physical character confronting Dodge on her own, or mostly on her own, but also just ultimately becoming the keeper of the keys when Tyler gives it to her. So what went into overall crafting that arc for her?
Yeah, I mean, we love just taking her from, in season 1, this like scared, anxiety-ridden girl who hid under the table when Sam Lesser attacked, to, her decision to remove her fear, and how that felt awesome, but also how that was destructive because there's, fear has a place in our lives. And so when we meet her at the top of season 2, she still is living without her fear in her head, but she's managed to kind of balance it and master it. She's found kind of a nice kind of happy medium. But it's the absence of fear has allowed her to be dating a demon that she doesn't realize is a demon, right? So we knew, her arc needed to include wanting to put her fear back in her head. And then once she did, letting that be the thing that starts giving her these little like red flags. Like there are very small moments in that party at Josh's where, she goes to take Gabe's hand and she like has like a little like moment and she thinks it's just like a spark from the carpet, but it's literally her fear being like, no, bad decision. And, her kind of having to come to terms with the betrayal of this lie of this guy that she had fallen for. And her, instead of her kind of crawling up into a ball and letting fear take over, her deciding that she's going to overcome that. And she's going to do one of the scariest things you can imagine, which is, face him and then fall off that balcony and
jump off. I mean, it was awesome. Yeah.
And we don't know if she would have a test flight before that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could have been the first time. But yeah, so her arc was also really, important and special to us, especially because Tyler leaves at the end of season 2. So now she's in charge. So he's, literally handing over the keys to her. And now when we see her at the top of season 3, she's the one who's sort of taken on that role, which is a completely new dynamic for her and for the family.
Mm-hmm. We should probably talk about another big new character this season, which is Josh, as you mentioned.
Hot Josh or
Hot
Evil
Josh?
Evil
Josh.
Evil Josh? Have you moved on from Evil Josh? Did you forgive him? Or
There are different opinions.
You're still doubling down on he's evil, Pete?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Don't trust him.
Well,
don't trust him.
Let me throw this out to you.
Horrible
Because
father. I mean, Jamie was just running around on her own. I mean, that poor God. Jamie.
There.
But they get together for a fun afternoon at the end of the season, so that's perfect. So Josh, you're familiar with the comic book, and in the comic book, we were drawn in by
here we go.
by Gabriel Rodriguez.
I can't believe that this is what you're using this time.
We're journalists, and this is an important.
Don't say
gotcha
we are
question.
journalists.
Over the course of it, I'm drawn in as someone who goes into the cave during prom, and a rock falls on him. That's the same fate that Josh befalls. So I guess my question is, am I hot Josh? Yeah. It's fine if you don't want to say to everyone, but like give me a wink or a nod or something. Yeah.
Wow. All right. There was a wink. I think while we're on the same note, we should probably ask, Pete gets chopped in half in the comic book, and there is a character who's named Dr. Zalbin, who's pretty crucial. He shows some x-rays at one point. Are they going to show up in season 3?
Netflix has really asked me not to answer any questions.
Good.
I really want to know things, right? I mean,
of course.
We absolutely People think that they want to know, but you don't want to. You want to
Episode 6.
It.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be bummed
Zalbin.
if I was like, Tyler's going to create the Alpha Key and kill Jackie? Wouldn't you be bummed if you knew that beforehand?
Yeah, it's definitely the same level as knowing whether Dr. Zalbin will even.
Unlock Dr. Zalbin. I do have a question about the villains. It feels like in this season we're with Eden and Gabe so much, and it almost there are points where I feel sympathy for them as a viewer, and I'm curious. We're moving into a season where a villain is not as fun to sympathize with so far as we know him. But I'm curious if that was something you guys decided in season 2 as like, this is sort of what we like to do as a storytelling device here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what was different and fun about season 2 versus season 1 is that you're not as much following Dodge in season 1. You're sometimes checking in with her, but you kind of don't know what she's really up to by design. She's kind of kept more mysterious. But what was really nice about season 2 is that the audience is in on the fact that Gabe is Dodge. And so there's a lot of enjoyment, I think, as an audience member in enjoyment and stress.
Certainly stress
in watching what they're up to and how they're doing it, and also just their dynamic was really fun for us to play. The fact that that Eden is this like Ruth is this demon who is reckless, and
I loved her eating habits.
So good, right?
So good.
She's amazing. Talia, she killed it. but there's enjoyment in just watching the two of them, even when they're kind of bickering. I think like just that they have their own dynamic and they're not these kind of mustache twirly like villains behind, behind the scenes. And, we also, one of the first things we needed to decide in breaking the season was, okay, when and how is the jig up, right? Because how long can we go before there's frustration in, come these fucking people just can't
pay attention.
And it's a really tricky thing, right? Because you want the enjoyment as long as possible for the audience to be like, oh, she doesn't know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, your characters risk just looking dumb. So, we landed on just the midpoint of the season. Episode 5 is when everything would kind of come out. But until then, we knew we wanted to have this dynamic where we could go back and forth to see what they were up to. And so that definitely was a change from season 1, but it was fun.
I love that decision that you made to just pull the lid off halfway through the season, because it just blows everything up in such a big way. And that it's a big one when I think you wrote that episode and then Carlton directed it. So you're like, oh, the two showrunners, big
something's going on in this episode.
What is...
This isn't going to be a filler
just like bopping around, having a little bit of fun. What is, now that you're 3 seasons in on this thing, what is the working relationship between you and Carlton like? Like, do you take on different jobs when it comes to the episodes, when it comes to production versus post-production? How does that break out?
I mean, there isn't like a very specific delineation of duties, and every day is kind of different. I mean, as he has throughout his career, runs and develops multiple shows at once. So I'm sort of, full-time Locke and Key is my baby all day, every day. I am developing other things, but I have been primarily focused on Locke and Key for the last 3 years, 2.5 years.
You're doing a great job raising your babies.
Oh, thank you. So, that's not to say he's not involved in almost everything. And, there are things that that he is just more skilled at, that like he's excellent at VFX notes, having, done that a lot in his career. And so there are things that he sort of will take the reins on more so than me. I would go up to Toronto a lot more before the pandemic. I was able to go up a few times during the pandemic. But it's every day is a little bit different, but I mean, in terms of story and scripts, he and I are, it's 50-50. We're always like, that's our, we both give sort of equal amount of time to stuff like that, because it's important to both of us, but, and same with editing and stuff like that. So every day is a little bit different. But it's very much a partnership, and it's been the best working partnership I've ever had. And he's the best. He's officiating. I'm getting married on Saturday, and he's officiating my wedding.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. That's so nice. He's producing the VFX for your wedding. It's really cool.
I'm actually not even going to be there. It's just going to be a hologram of me.
That's smart.
You got to work. We got stuff to do.
That's amazing.
While we're on the sort of shared writing process, how much time do you guys dedicate to putting the Chowder mentions in each episode? Is that like big part of the process?
Oh my God. I cannot tell you also how excited I was that you found all our Chowder references. That started as like a writer's room inside joke where, we were just talking about the town of Matheson, and we really love like wanting Matheson to feel real. Like, I think like giving it a sense of place. And I remember early on in season 1, Carlton was like, well, these places always have these like wars in town, like, like between different bakeries or different coffee shops.
Sure, yeah.
And like, in Philly, Pat's and Gino's, the different Philly cheesesteak places. So he was like, I think there should be 2 dueling chowder places, Bill's and Phil's. And then we kind of started that as like a little runner with the Jackie Tyler story. It's just like a little meet cute thing. I actually, for the writer's room season 2, I had made little koozies for Bill with a logo of Bill Chowder on it, and on the back it says Phil's is trash.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
So I appreciate that you found all the the little references to it's like there was that one in episode 7 to how the bad chowder that they had
they had bad chowder.
My favorite is the very off-camera conversation during Winterfest. It's just having a multi-line conversation about the chowder that I'm like, that is there.
We have actually a whole backstory about these guys, because there's also the Wheeler sisters gin, which is the gin that Ellie gifts Nina in season 1.
Oh, right.
Nina drinks. She says it's the Wheeler Sisters gin. It's a little distillery here in town. So we have a whole backstory where Bill and Phil are brothers. And Bill stole the chowder recipe from his brother and opened his own chowder place. So there's really like deep family roots.
Now I want this show spin off.
And they're married to the Wheeler sisters who own the distillery. So there's just so much tension in Matheson downtown. Like,
oh man.
Yeah.
And is this like what you're stepping into on Saturday? Like, is there a big like family
the chowders?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they all get together on Sundays and they have their, Bill brings his chowder, Phil brings his chowder. Everyone feels like they have to take a taste of both, because otherwise you're upsetting one.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll tell you what, that's too much chowder.
No way.
No way.
Yes, never too much chowder.
No joke. I had chowder for lunch today. Legitimately, and not very randomly. So
I'm a little upset that no one's having a splattering cocktail right now.
That's right.
Early.
Oh my God, we forgot about that, Pete.
I know. I was waiting for your finale episode. I was like, are they drinking it? I don't know.
Oh,
that's right.
All right, we're gonna have to tape another
release the
episode where
splattering.
Pete makes the splattering, and then we'll tape that. We'll tape that after this. I don't know. I know you said you really can't really talk about season 3, but there are so many big changes that are coming up. One that I thought was really interesting that you left off at the end of the season is we've got this Lucas Echo wandering around at this point. How much does that change the dynamic that he now exists as not a person, but as an echo in the world of Locke and Key?
You'll find out very quickly in season 3, what Lucas is up to. We really chose to focus on the family and the new family dynamics that exist because of some of the events of the end of season 2, like Tyler leaving, like Kinsey being placed as kind of the head of the family, like Nina potentially being memory keyed. So, we're not as focused on, I would say, the Lucas of it, but we do give you an ending to his story. Mm-hmm. But there's not as much Lucas in season 3.
Okay. What about when you're talking about family?
It also felt like his story felt very complete, to be honest. Like, I mean, certainly there are ways we could have gone with it, but also we didn't want to be redundant, and a lot of his story, going back from season 1, and it just felt very complete to us. So instead, we kind of chose to focus more on these kind of new family dynamics.
Yeah. Well, speaking about family, though, are we potentially going to see more of a family connection between Hot Josh and Captain Frederick Gideon?
Well, again, nothing is accidental in our show. So, Hot Josh did, I hate that I'm not going to, why are you having me call him that?
Yeah,
we've made that the real.
Yeah, you can say,
eventually it's going to be on the show.
You can say, not a good father, Josh. Anything you want to put on Josh.
He's got a granite jaw. It's just like, you could cut onions on that thing. It's amazing.
I mean, Nina clearly has a type, right? I mean, Tech and Brendan Hines next to each other. Yeah. No, I mean, we wanted to introduce him for many reasons, not just because we really wanted a love interest for Nina, because she's someone who deserves a new beginning and new love. But we thought it would be interesting for him to have some tie to the mythology also, so that, again, it's like this theme of like being able to right the wrongs from generations past, and all of that I think just gives the story so much more depth. So yes, you will see more of that in season 3.
Will we see how the hotness develops from Revolutionary? Because I will say it wasn't super there in Revolutionary War times. No offense to our future villain here.
Yes, I think after generations and generations, I think he's been molded into
evolution, a natural hotness evolution.
Yeah. I don't know how much you can speak to this necessarily and not to look too far ahead, but are you looking beyond season 3 at this point? Are you working on potentially a season 4 or 5, or are you seeing where season 3 goes and then looking at it from there?
We're not actively working on anything beyond that. I mean, these are characters we love so much, and there's definitely story that I feel we could tell with them beyond. But I think it's a little bit like I was saying earlier, there's something nice to be gained from being able to watch all the episodes and also, hear feedback, and just how they're landing. It's, even I haven't seen the season 2 episodes. I hadn't watched them in like 6 months. And so now even in rewatching them, there are new things that come out to me that say, oh, I would love, this little piece. It's great that I'm glad we're doing this in season 3, because it's something that, in rewatching it feels like naturally begs to be answered or dive more into. So I think there's a lot to be gained for taking a breath, because we haven't had really one from the storytelling, and, kind of seeing where we're at and seeing where the story might want to go.
And I know this isn't exactly your department, but are we going to have to wait another year to see season 3, or perhaps will it be sooner than that?
It's not my department. I'm sorry. That's a Netflix question. I mean, I hope, I will say visual effects take a long time.
Yeah.
Particularly ghosts. Spoiler alert, more ghosts in season 3.
Nice.
All right.
I mean, speaking of
spoil that.
speaking of ghosts, I really love the kind of like the way the ghosts kind of played Gabe was such a fun reveal. Like it was so well done and such a kind of like reserved ghost move that I thought it was really very smart and cool. We were talking about little things, so I just kind of wanted to.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, well, the Sam Lesser arc is also like our writer's room collective, like one of our favorite things about the show and also from the comic. And so, even though it's a small moment in the season and we only get to see Sam twice in the whole season, we loved being able to kind of touch in with him just to kind of keep him alive.
Yeah.
Even though he's very dead.
Yeah.
Are we going to see more of Sam and Chamberlain hanging out, just like being buds in the graveyard? And doing stuff?
Man, that sounds fun.
Spin-off buddy comedy.
Oh, but yeah, I know. What do those two guys talk about all day?
Yeah, right.
That's what I'm curious about. Well, and that's what, talking about the ghosts being there and just sort of the expanded Key House universe, it just reminds me of like being a kid and having like the map of the fun world where you can be like, over here's where this happens, over here's, and I love the ever expanding version of that you guys have.
I know, it's fun, right? And I don't think that like, because I know you're like, why don't they just use the ghost key and go ask Chamberlain all the things? I don't think he's all knowing of all the things. I think he has specific knowledge about certain things, like, he knows how keys are made. He knows what happened with Rendell and his friends 25 years ago, but I don't think we wouldn't want to play him as just like this all-knowing, like, just come and ask me all the questions and I can tell you. And we liked giving him that turn of like, he seems like such a nice old man. Oh, what a naive old man. What a silly old man. Why? Don't tell that boy how to make a key.
Yeah, exactly.
And that Gay would come back and he'd be like, I see that parasite, motherfucker.
Yeah, you think I'm
so great.
My first day as a ghost? You don't even know the stuff I've seen, kid.
I know we're going to have to let you go in a second. So again, not to plumb you for too much information about season 3, but is there a character that perhaps we should keep our eyes on?
And is it Gracie?
Is it Gracie?
Gracie the car. A character.
Cool. Is there a character you should keep your eyes on? So, I said how there is the town of Matheson, is important to us to kind of build out, and so the different people in town, even like Matuku before it became a demon, and just like to give the fabric of the town. There's a character that we introduce in episode 2 with Nina, who's named Gordy Shaw, who is kind of funding the theater.
Yeah.
And I'll just say once again, nothing is random in our show. Everything is purposeful. So, he used to be friends with Rendell. He knows him from back in the day. So again, nothing is random in our show. So that's one character. Great. I mean, all the characters, Gideon, all of these, all of our characters are super important, but there's a reason we introduced that guy.
Man, that's great. That scene awesome. I was like, there's a lot here for a little random
from
scene.
A little thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Meredith, thank you so much for coming on. Congratulations in advance on getting married.
Yes. I hope Saturday is an amazing day for you.
Thank you. Technically, I will say, as a little disclaimer asterisk, we got married. We eloped in our backyard last year on the same day because we couldn't have family and friends because we were in our surge here in Los Angeles. Carlton also officiated that one.
Oh, wow.
So I keep telling him he gets like a rewrite now. And his second draft, so he's very kindly officiating again. Now we get to have the party. So I say I'm having a wedding, getting married, where it's technically, I guess, a vow renewal ceremony. On
well, the pressure's off, though. That's the best part about it.
I know, yeah. It's
just
already
have
done.
fun. Yeah.
You mean I can't back out?
That's tricky. It's a little tricky.
You might have a key for that.
No.
And for all of you out there, if you want to support our podcast, patreon.com/Comic Book Club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Crowdcast on YouTube. Come hang out. We would love to chat with you about Locke Key. iTunes, Android, Spotify, Stitcher, or the app of your choice to subscribe, listen, and follow the show at Locke Key Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. ComicBookClubLive.com for this podcast and many more. Until next time, keep it locked right here.